Okay, so we are now recording. So we're going to start with talking about why do we need good sleep? Why is this important? So this is all taken from research. So without it, parents are negatively impacted. So if our kids um don't get good sleep, obviously they are negatively impacted, but we also need good sleep. Um, so adults, parents are negatively impacted by not great sleep, by having poor daytime functioning, right? It's linked to maternal depression, even difficulties within marriages. Okay. For kids, how are they negatively impacted without good sleep? Unintentional injuries. Kids are more likely to trip and fall. They're more likely to have difficult temperament, right? Obesity is even linked to difficulties with sleep. Poor academic performance as kids get older. There is links to their grades falling due to sleep. And then challenging behavior. Okay, so non-compliance, aggression, and self-injury. There have been studies that shown that children that don't get good sleep have higher occurrences of some challenging behaviors. So we all need good sleep, right? I mean, you guys know, like even as an adult, the days you don't get good sleep, right? You're not at your like peak performance, right? You might struggle more to go through those daily tasks that you have, right? You might be more irritable. So the same goes for our kids. So when we talk about good sleep, what does this mean? Okay, so good sleep means falling asleep quickly within 5 to 15 minutes, staying asleep through the night, so not having any occurrences of night waking, getting a total appropriate amount of sleep, waking up without a lot of trouble in the morning, and then not feeling drowsy throughout the day. So that would be the definition of good sleep. So we're going to come back to some of those defining characteristics of good sleep after we jump in a little bit to our sensory system to talk about how regulation, also our body's ability to regulate and calm, also impacts our ability to get good sleep. So sensory processing, like I said, if you haven't seen it already, please go back and watch the family group we had with our OT, Kate Dawson. She did a really in-depth discussion about the sensory systems. But I'm going to give you a little quick version of that today as a little refresher about the sensory systems and how it relates to sleep. So all the information that we receive from the world comes to us through our sensory systems, right? So we hear things, touch, we can feel, taste, smell, or see things, right? There are also other senses. Proprioception, which are body awareness. So how do we feel our body and where it's at in relation to our environment? Like I know I'm sitting in a chair right now. I can tell that my body's in this chair. Vestibular is it has relation to movement. Okay. Um, Also pain and temperature are two other sensory systems in our body, our body's ability to say, oh, that's hurts, or oh, I'm hot or I'm cold. So um every child, every person, not even every child, has differences in all of these sensory systems, right? So, for an example, like I don't like the touch of cotton balls. That is a difference in my touch, right? I don't like the way it feels, where someone might feel a cotton ball, I'm like, oh, that's totally fine. Like, why do you have a problem with that? So, everyone has sensory differences. However, young children with autism or sensory processing disorders, or sometimes kids with developmental delays, can have more significant differences within how they interpret their environment, right? So some kids have sound sensitivities, right? So something we might hear, sorry, I'm congested, so I might sound a little funny. But something that we might hear might sound tolerable, but something that a child hears, it might be very loud and they might cover their ears, right? It's because their hearing is different than ours. It's more sensitive. Okay. Same goes for touch. Some kids don't like the way certain clothing feels on their bodies. Some kids are very averse to certain tastes or smells, right? Some kids like to look at things up close or like to look at their shadow, get preoccupied with shadows, right? It's because they get input differently than we do through their visual systems. Okay. OTs often look at these other two systems, the proprioception system and the vestibular system, because a lot of young children do have differences with their proprioception system. So I'm sitting in this chair right now. I feel my body. I'm sitting in this chair. Some kids might not get that same input by sitting in this chair. Have you ever seen a child that like slinks down in their chair, right? Or falls out of their chair, right? It's because they're not getting the same support. They don't have that same proprioception input as I do sitting in my chair. So there are different strategies that we can use to help children get more connected to their body. And we're going to talk about that, because if they are more connected to their body, they're more secure with where they're at, it will impact their ability to regulate and sleep as well. And then the vestibular system. Now, again, I'm not an occupational therapist, but it has to do with movement. So some kids need more movement than others, right? Some kids might jump up and down or run around or rock or want to spin or go upside down. That's differences in their vestibular systems. Okay. They need that extra movement to help their bodies feel regulated. A lot of the times when we have differences in any of these sensory areas, we compensate, right? So even some behaviors or some characteristics of children with autism that are related to movement, right? Like you might see some kids, they call it like hand flapping or stimming, right? They're moving their bodies in ways that help them to regulate, right? Where to us might be like, oh, like that, why are you doing that? You know, we might not understand because we don't have to move our bodies that way to feel calm, right? But some children, either with sensory differences or with autism or sensory processing disorder, they might engage in those movements because it helps them to feel better. It helps them to feel more regulated. Okay. Okay. So that's my that's my 2-minute review of the sensory system. We're going to talk a little bit more about strategies we can use in relation to that. So self-regulation. When we talk about regulation, we're talking about a person's ability to adjust and control their own energy levels, emotions, behaviors, and attention. Okay. Appropriate self-regulation suggests this is done in ways that are socially acceptable, right? So what does that mean? But a person that has a neurotypical sensory system, sorry, a person that has a neurotypical sensory system might be able to regulate in ways that, you know, look or are perceived as socially acceptable, right? Like if I am too hot, I'm going to put a fan on in my office, right? That's a way that that's an appropriate self-regulation strategy, right? So we have to help children to learn how to engage in appropriate self-regulation strategies. Okay. When a child is regulated, it helps them feel in control of their body, to control impulses and emotions. It helps them feel successful and have positive interactions with others. It'll also help them to have good self-esteem. If a child is not regulated, and they are what we might call like overstimulated or understimulated, they're going to have challenges in the classrooms, and definitely challenges with going to sleep. So, perfect segue. So a kid's nervous system learns to regulate their responses to the environment to lull or soothe themselves to sleep. Now, sometimes this takes longer than others. Even children who are neurotypical, like my own, have difficulty self-regulating in order to go to sleep. So if you want to share some strategies, you can go ahead and share strategies in the chat box of things that you might have tried to help your child sleep through the night. So I can share some of my own. I know for both my son and my daughter, we've tried lots of things. We have tried scents, right? So diffusers in their bedroom with lavender, right? Like calming scents. We have tried bedtime routines, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but really trying to have a consistent and calm bedtime routine. We have tried, all the stuff, the animals in their bed, different night lights, right? We've tried lots of things. If you guys want to share any other strategies, go ahead and share those in the chat box as well. But there are tons of stuff out there that are marketed to help kids sleep, right? Like those sleep sacks, weighted blankets, things like that. I will say that when it comes to weighted anything, right? Like weighted blankets, weighted vests, things of that nature, always talk with your child's occupational therapist about that. There are like weight limits and lengths of time that you're supposed to use them. So if that's something that you have trial it or want to possibly trial at home, I suggest talking to your child's occupational therapist. And if you're not in contact with them regularly, or you're not on Class Dojo, just reach out to your teacher, right? And they can always put you into contact with the OT. So here we're going to go over some good sleep strategies that really tackle those proprioceptive and vestibular systems. There's more other sensor systems as well to help kids to regulate. Okay, so heavy work, okay, helps us with our proprioception system, while movement helps us with our vestibular system. So some movement activities like yoga, okay, can be really helpful because it combines both heavy work and movement. Inversion activities, right? That girl right there is doing a downward dog, right? If you're familiar with yoga, or somersaults, right? Or even if you are just giving your kiddo a little slip and crashing into a pillow, right? Those sort of inversion activities. Wheelbarrows. You guys ever do wheelbarrows where your kids' hands are kind of like in that downward dog position, but that you hold their legs and they walk on their hands, okay? All of those activities are combining heavy work and movement. Same with snow angels. You know what a snow angel is? Where you lay on the ground in the snow and you move your arms up and down, right? If it's snowy outside, you can do that, or even just doing it on your floor, on the carpet, right? Wall or chair push-ups. You guys know what a push-up is? We've done these to my son before. If you put their hands on the wall, they can do 10 push-ups, okay, on the wall. Animal walks. Kids love these. Walk like a bear, walk like a crab, okay? Carrying heavy objects, okay? Says furniture, not too heavy. But weighted balls, 5 pounds or below, this says. Put some books in a backpack. If you have a little shopping cart at home, have them push the shopping cart around, right? So getting them to do some heavy work and some movement prior to bedtime will help them to start regulating. Also, deep pressure is another way to give some proprioceptive input by massage, right? My kids still ask for squeezies, we call them, where I just like tuck them in their bed, put their sheets like right around their bodies and give them little squeezes right down their back and their legs, like a little massage, right? But that pressure, that deep pressure, if you ever have a massage, you know how it relaxes your muscles, right? And that helps your body to regulate. Tactile play. So again, this is working on our sense of touch. Okay. But the like scooping and dumping within tactile play, yes, it's working on our system of touch, but it's also working again that proprioceptive system. A big bin of rice. Kid sticks their hand in that bin of rice, right? They're feeling where their hand is, right? It's proprioception. So you could use dry macaroni, rice, or sand, even during bath time. Get some buckets or cups. Like my daughter loves scooping and pouring water in the bathtub, pretending to wash her baby doll's hair, right? But that tactile type of play will provide some input to multiple sensory systems, right? So you try to hit multiple systems. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And those activities will create some regulation within your child. Think about their environment. I struggle with this with my own son. Our visual systems can also be overstimulated. There's a lot of toys or clutter or clothes, like my son's clothes all over his room. So I constantly am trying to have him clean up and me clean up and him learn some responsibility, but also like the reduction of the clutter and the visual stimulation in the room will help them to regulate better. Right. So that's why they say like takes the toys out of the bedroom, have a couple, stuffed animals if that's okay, but not a lot of toys, because then the bedroom becomes the play place and not the place where we sleep. Right. And it can become very visually cluttered. Sensory bottles are visual bottles. You guys ever seen them? They have a ton of them on Pinterest. It's kind of same idea of like a lava lamp, right? Where you can watch different liquids and glitter and different objects in like a bottle. You turn it either way. That can be calming to our visual systems. Sometimes things that I do for my son, instead of having a television show, they have those like fireplace apps, right? So it's just like a fireplace running on his TV and it runs through the night, right? So again, it's visually calming to their systems. Some other strategies, lighting. Okay, so make sure that the lighting is low in their rooms. Any sort of nightlight that you do get, make sure the movement is predictable. We want the environment when they go to sleep to be the same environment that is there if they should awake throughout the night. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So if you have a rotating light, that's fine. Just make sure it stays on throughout the night. This is really interesting. Red and orange lighting. So there's research now that blues mimic daytime, and red or orange mimic nighttime. So if you can have a color changing lamp, try a red or orange, see if that helps. And reduce your screen times, right? Because the TVs and other screens at night can project that blue light, right? That mimic the daytime. And it can confuse your brain into thinking that, oh, it's daytime, we should be awake right now. Okay, so try it. I talked a little bit about this. I've tried smells and diffusers before, but lavender can be a scent that helps with calming. Okay. Again, there should be limits on how long you run diffusers. So just make sure you look into that before running them like all night. But now they have really cute like stuffed animals that have like lavender, right? Like in them, and some that you can even like put in the microwave and warm up, right? That's all helping us to calm by using our senses, right? The temperature, the warmness, the smell, the lavender, the coziness, the squeezing of a stuffed animal is proprioception. A hug is proprioception, right? So that's kind of combining those strategies. Oh, sound machines. I've tried those. But predictable sounds that go throughout the night can help. Like some people love sleeping with fans on. I do. But any sort of slow rhythmical music or sounds that are consistent throughout the night can help. You just don't want to have something that's going to start and shut off. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but you want things to be consistent throughout the night. So continue to use this multi-sensory approach. Okay. So crashing. And crashing just means like putting pillows on the ground and running and jumping into the pillows, right? So doing that while listening to some light music. Stop and go activities, maybe in with a night light, right? Stop and go activities. We've talked about this in one of our other trainings on positive behavior supports, but activities that are stop and go really do help with regulation. So things like freeze dance, right? Things like red light, green light, Mother May I, all those games that you have to stop and go will help teach a kiddo how to regulate, to go from moving to still will help with regulation. Cold water. So cold water, there's actually research in this area, can actually be very regulating. I don't know if you've ever seen any, there are people that swear by these like ice baths and cold showers. There's a lot of truth in it. It really does help to regulate your nervous system. So for young kids, maybe doing some water play. We do have water bins here at school and we fill with cold water, even throwing some ice cubes in it and let them play in it. And doing these things, okay, prior to bedtime to just get your children in that mode of regulation prior to going to sleep. Think about activities that match your child's energy level. And then you pair it with things that are more calming, right? So if they're running and crashing all the time, right? You're like, okay, we got to bring this down. Maybe you're going to have some calm music on, right? And then you're going to transition from running and crashing to, oh, look, I brought out this cool water bin. Now you have the water bin, you have the music on. You can maybe play with that for a couple minutes. Maybe you even read your bedtime story while you're in the water bin. Okay, and then water bin's all done. Okay, now we're gonna get our jammies on, right? So building these strategies that help regulate into that bedtime routine will help. Now remember, I've said this like 3 times now. Whatever strategy you add during bedtime, that stimulus or strategy must be there unavailable throughout the night. So if you play music and then at any point in the night it stops, there's a strong chance your child will wake up. Okay. Because they might have become, accustomed to or reliant on that strategy to help them to remain asleep. We'll talk more about that. The occupational therapist that this presentation was created with wanted me to put a note in here also about sleep apnea, because there are different types of sleep apnea, and sometimes the symptoms of sleep apnea can look like difficulty sleeping. So we're not going to go through all of these, but restless sleep, nocturnal sweating, sleeping in different positions, increased nighttime arousals can all be from sleep apnea. So if your child has any of those symptoms, just talk to your doctor to see if that's something that they would recommend testing for. So now we're going to go back to those good sleep characteristics. So you're going to want to think about, what is the goal for my child? Okay, let's set a good sleep goal. Do we want them to get a developmentally appropriate night's sleep? or amount of sleep throughout the day? Do we want them to fall asleep quickly within 5 to 15 minutes? Or do we want them to sleep throughout the night? And whether or not we want them to sleep independently throughout the night. So again, a lot of these strategies have their assumptions in behavior analysis. So behavior analysis looks at falling asleep as a behavior or a skill, and they look at sleep problems as skill deficits. So these can then be addressed by understanding the variables, right, the environment, and by teaching the skills needed. So let's look at goal number 1. My child will get a developmentally appropriate amount of sleep. Okay. So difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or complying with bedtime routines sometimes occur if a child is expected to be in bed too long. Difficulty waking up or daytime tiredness may be related to child being in bed for too short of a period of time. Okay, so the solution is to schedule a developmentally appropriate amount of sleep. Okay, because I know for a fact there have been families where they're like, well, my kid can't get up until X time because that's when I get up, right? But you might have a child that starts to display challenging behavior because they're expected to be in bed for too long of a period of time. And the opposite is true as well, right? If they don't get enough sleep in total, you might see that there are challenges. So what do we do? All right, so here are sleep duration recommendations, and I'm going to send you guys all of this in the slides. But I want you to let's look first at ourselves, okay? Either adult or older adult. So we need to get at an average recommended, 7 to 9 hours of sleep, okay? Do I get that? Some nights. But look at the maybe appropriate. Maybe appropriate is 6, no less than 6. Maybe appropriate, no more than 10. Now, if we go to preschool, okay, we'll look at the recommendation. The recommendation is 10 to 13 hours of sleep for preschool. Maybe appropriate 8 to 9, maybe appropriate 14. Okay, so when we're thinking about how long should my kid go to sleep, what time should I put them to bed, what time they have to get up, it should be within this range. Oh, sorry, guys. I'm going to put that back there. Okay. So I'm going to go back to this. So this is really important, right? So think about your bedtimes that you have right now and think about the time a child has to get up. Now, this is total duration throughout the day. So if your child naps, add that in, right? So if they sleep for 8 hours a night and take a 2-hour nap during the day for preschool, that's appropriate. It falls in that 10 to 13 hours, okay? The difficulty is when kids start weaning naps. Right? My daughter's in this phase now. It's super fun. Whereas sometimes they nap, sometimes they don't, right? So that does impact bedtime. Okay? Because they need a larger nighttime sleep duration if they don't nap, right? So you have to kind of play around with that. And that's challenging for some families if bedtime is changing, right? Because a child is skipping a nap one day. Okay. But just think about that. If we are having too high of expectations, or too low of expectations, and the child is getting too much or too little sleep, it's going to impact their behavior. Okay. Now, goal 2. My child will fall asleep within 5 to 15 minutes. This might seem like, wow, how can we do that? I have to tell you that there was a time, my first child, my son, where we would spend hours, and I'm not lying, 1, 2, 3 hours trying to put my son to sleep. And it was very, very frustrating for everybody involved. So we're going to talk about the forbidden zone. Okay, so this is that line, that blue line, okay, is the average person's alert and kind of like overall alertness. So above that red line, okay, is where they are very alert, and below the red line are when they are sleepy or tired. Okay, so this is an average. So the start of that line is the night before, and then we wake up, right? And we're alert, alert, alert. See that midday dip, right? That's the siesta time, right? After lunch. And look at that forbidden zone. You see that? You have your highest peak of alertness right before you go to bed, right? So if you try to put a child to sleep in that forbidden zone, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to fight you. Okay, they're not going to want to go to sleep. They have all this energy, and you're going to be fighting against their biological clock, essentially, right? That's telling them, oh no, I'm awake right now. It's not time for bed. Okay, so what do we do about this? So this is something that we call a fated bedtime. Okay, but you don't need a therapist to help you with this. There are behavior specialists that work with families to help them with bedtime strategies. But this is something that you could try on your own as well. The fated bedtime. So it sounds counterproductive, but you want to go to sleep later than you normally do. So if your normal bedtime for your kid is 8:30 and they are fighting you, you're trying strategies, you're trying to build their nice routine at bedtime. You know, they take a bath, you have your activities, you know, maybe they, you know, do some yoga, they have a bath, you tuck them into bed, you have a nice routine, and then they're wired still, right? Maybe you need to push back your bedtime later, okay? So maybe if your normal bedtime is 8:30, maybe you don't put them to bed until 9 or 9:15, okay? Because here's what's going to happen. They're going to be tired. They need to find sleep valuable. And I know it's like the ultimate unfairness is kids don't value sleep, and all adults want is more sleep, right? So they don't find sleep valuable. But if they are tired, okay, they will find sleep more valuable. So a little bit later bedtime, okay? In hopes that they knock right out, right? You still have to do your strategies, right? Meet their energy, you know, do your routine, iron that out, but push everything back, okay? And then you can gradually increase their bedtime, right? So if you went from 8:30 to 9:30, you're like, well, 9:30, they're going right to sleep, but it's way too late for us, okay? They start backing it up, right? 9:20, 9:15, 9:10, 9 o'clock, okay? And you're going to find your sweet spot, okay? You're going to find the part right after the forbidden zone, right? And that's when you want bedtime to be, right? But you have to find the forbidden zone, right? And bedtime needs to be right after that, right? So this fated bedtime is one way to kind of find that forbidden zone so you can plan your bedtime after it. Okay. We're going to go on to goal 3, sleeping through the night. Okay. When things that are present or occasion sleep are suddenly removed, or not available or not present when they wake through the night, then you're gonna find that kids have more night awakenings. Okay, they might have a harder time going to sleep, and maybe even sleep interfering behavior. Okay, so let's think about this. What are your sleep dependencies? Now, I am an avid TV sleeper. I know it's a problem. My husband knows it's a problem, right? We compromise on things. But we've learned that if we try like the sleep timer, right? And I go to sleep with the TV on, and then it goes off on its own in the middle of the night, I will wake up, right? And we're gonna talk about that. But everybody has sleep dependencies, right? Maybe it's a TV, maybe it's the radio, maybe it's a book, maybe you need to be full, right? Kids have bottles and cups and they have full bellies, right? Maybe it's a person, maybe the kiddos want you to be there. Okay, maybe they want to be rocked or patted or held. Maybe they want their stuffed animals or a blankie or certain lights. Everyone has a thing, right, that they want with them for sleep. Now, we want to eliminate or fade any of those sleep dependencies that can't be there throughout the night, right? And mom and dad can't be there throughout the night. And this is the hard thing, right? You want to be able to help your child to regulate, do the things with them, get them into bed, maybe say your prayers, and then let them fall asleep on their own. If they fall asleep on their own, okay, they're going to be less likely to wake in the middle of the night because you're not there. If you sit there with them or lay with them until they fall asleep, the chances are when they wake up in the middle of the night and you're not there, they're going to wake all the way up instead of just waking up a little bit and going back to sleep, which we're going to talk about. Think about sleep items, sleep dependencies, right? That could be there no matter what. If you go on vacation, you go to grandma's house, things like blankies, stuffed animals, sound machines, right? Those things are things that are okay and can be there throughout the night. So I want to talk to you about this. So it's kind of confusing, this chart, but this is like a night sleep. So it starts at 8 p.m., right? And it goes all the way to 6 a.m. And this line, right? You see this continuous line that starts at awake, goes to non-REM, just shows like our different patterns while we're sleeping. Now, if you see what those yellow dots are, that means that's the amount of time that our body, right, gets to these like awake states throughout the night. So we're not fully awake, right? Like, oh, we're up for the day, but you're pretty close, right? Like you're out of REM sleep, right? And you are up, right? You're not awake, but you are not actively in REM sleep. Okay. So if the things in your room are not there, or the state of your body is different, right? From when you initially went to sleep, when you get to that first kind of awake state, kids are going to pop out of bed. Okay. But if the things are still there that they had when they fell asleep, they are more likely to just drift right back off into sleep, right? So, and you'll see these times, like, and it makes sense. Like if bedtime is like 8:30, first wake up is 10:30, second wake up is 11:30, and then it's like 1:30, right? And then it gets a little more frequent, right? So that's just a typical sleep stage of a young child. They're gonna get to these little bit of awake states, okay? So again, it's the night waking is not necessarily the problem. It's reinitiating sleep, right? It's like, oh, I'm like almost awake. I'm going back to sleep, right? So again, what we need to do is kind of fade out whatever those sleep dependencies are that aren't kind of going to stay with them, right? So if we go back here to those sleep dependencies, those babies that drink bottles throughout the night, or even younger toddlers or preschoolers, if they're still having like a bottle or a big cup of milk or a large snack right before bed, sure, it's going to make them sleepy. But once their belly starts to empty, and they get to one of those more awake states and they're not as full, they might pop up. That's why babies wake up throughout the night, right? Give them a bottle or give them mommy's milk, right? But as kids get older, we want to fade those bottles and really heavy late night snacks because it actually will increase the likelihood that they're going to get up throughout the night. Okay. Um, And I'm not gonna go over, that's kind of like the end of the strategies, and I'll give you guys some time for questions. Um, I'm not gonna talk about any sort of like sleep training or anything like that in this presentation. It gets a little controversial, but I will say, if your kiddo is waking up and coming to you in the middle of the night, the best thing to do is to bring them back to their bed, right? So they know like they have that consistency with, oh, even if I do get up, I'm gonna have to go back in my room. Um, but I would encourage you to just try one strategy. Okay. Parenting is hard. You guys are all amazing. We talk about a lot about positive behavior supports, and being positive isn't pretending everything's good. It's seeing the good in everything, right? So things can get rough, but pick one thing to start with. Okay. Pick one strategy to start implementing, and hopefully you'll see a change. Okay. I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.